An official hello, everyone. My name is Danielle Ruger-Morowski. I am the Associate Director of Partnerships at Parker Dewey. I'm very excited to talk to you today about Parker Dewey, our micro-internships, and our partnership options. So to give you an idea of what to expect with today's presentation, we're going to start by covering the basics. What is Parker Dewey? From there, we're going to talk about how it works for our unique audiences, how it works for the company, is how it works for the students and recent graduates, and also how it works for all of you, our current or potential Parker Dewey partners. We'll talk a little bit about our different program options or our different partnership options, and the goal is that you come away with an understanding of what Parker Dewey is and how you can use it to your students' and employers' best advantage going forward based on your unique institutional goals and needs. So before delving into exactly what Parker Dewey is, I want to first give some context for why Parker Dewey is a thing. Where did we come from? Why did we start? And it's because it was acknowledged that there are a lot of barriers and challenges that are consistently being faced by students and recent graduates who are trying to launch their careers. On the screen, you see just a few examples of those challenges we hear about frequently, but a lot of them have to do with time. Students who are student athletes or non-traditional students or commuters, they've got other responsibilities and things going on that usually don't leave them with a lot of time. And that can be a real barrier in starting with traditional internships and other types of opportunities that are ultimately really valuable to them. Another is transportation. We see a lot of students who maybe aren't even that far from where they'd like to do an internship or something along those lines with, but if they don't have a car or public transportation isn't really available, that can really be a challenge for them. A lot of students, I always put up a poll at the beginning of all our student FAQ webinars as well. What we hear from a lot of students is, I don't know what I want to do. And especially with how little time they have in terms of summers to do traditional internships, it can be overwhelming the idea of committing to something that long term when you're thinking, I really only have one summer to do this. So they're looking for ways to explore without having to make a long-term commitment or without having to rearrange their whole lives. We also hear from a lot of students who can't afford to do unpaid opportunities. They have to keep the part-time or sometimes full-time job that is paying for tuition. They can't afford to risk that going away. So even if an opportunity is paid, sometimes they can't afford the break. And especially if it's unpaid, it may make the difference between being able to make tuition next semester or not. No, I promise this webinar is not going to be a downer, but we start with some of these challenges just so we can identify, where we're coming from in terms of why Parker Dewey was created. Now, since we've seen some more folks jump in the room, hello to everybody who is joining. Lovely to see you. Also want to put a reminder out there for those who didn't see it earlier. We find all these challenges and all the ways that students want to be engaged. One of the ways we do that is through our annual student sentiment survey. We ask questions about what barriers they're facing, what are they looking for, how do they want to learn about new opportunities, and that survey is currently open. So I'm putting it in the chat again. If you want to do just a quick repost on LinkedIn, maybe tag a couple of students you'd love to see take this. This is going to be open through this weekend. And again, it's really valuable for everything else that we're doing. Now, on the flip side of things, some of the challenges that are faced by employers, we see a wide range of things employers are coming to us with, hoping for help. And the good news is Parker Dewey can help in a lot of different ways. I'm going to break it down. But there are some companies who are realizing when they're meeting students who are juniors and seniors, man, this would have been some great talent for our internship, but they didn't necessarily take classes or build skills that make them actually applicable for this opportunity. So they're realizing if I can get in front of students earlier, if the student had known about my company and about the work we do when they were declaring a major or when they were choosing their classes, this could have been a great connection. We also have other employers who don't have a great sense of brand recognition among students. Maybe they have opportunities, but students only associate them with one type of opportunity or don't know about them at all. So a lot of different ways that companies are struggling. Another one we're seeing more recently is known as the application avalanche. I imagine many of you are having conversations about this. AI has made it a lot easier for students to apply, which is great. We love it when things are easier for students. But since it is so much easier, sometimes students are applying to things that actually aren't the best fit, or submitting an application because AI said it's done without really thinking it through or proofreading it. So employers are then just inundated by these applications, and they're wondering, how do I figure out of this pile of applications who is actually a good candidate, who I should offer our offers to? So that brings us to Parker Dewey and why we exist. Our CEO saw the challenges on both sides of things for the early career talent and for the employers and said, I think I've got something that is going to help both sides here. So how this helps students, it creates opportunities that are accessible for them, even if they're busy, even if they don't have transportation, even if they don't know what they want to do. I'm going to explain exactly what micro internships are and why they're accessible to folks in all of those situations. For employers, it's helping them access some of those demographics they might have otherwise missed for the reasons already discussed and assess them in a real way. They get to make hiring decisions based not just on a resume or an interview, but on real project work. And then for all of you, our partners at the universities, at the colleges, we have some nonprofit partners as well. This is helping you with your goals of connecting those two audiences, of making sure everyone, employers and students, can find a fit that is going to lead to mutual satisfaction and just good outcomes all around. So with that covered, we're going to get into exactly what is a micro internship. First, I want to make another note because I see we still have some other folks entering. I am keeping an eye on the chat. So if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to put those in there. If for some reason I get behind, fear not, I will catch up at the end, but usually pretty good about being able to answer those questions while we're going through. So as promised, what are these micro internships? Well, to put it very succinctly, they're short-term paid professional projects. But to delve into each of those elements a little bit, what do we mean by projects? Our definition is that there's something that the micro intern is completing. There's a deliverable. There's something that they get to put on their resume, not just I spent time, but I completed something. And that deliverable is part of what makes it a micro internship. Ongoing responsibilities, those are things you'll find maybe in a traditional internship or a full-time role, but micro internships, there's something that they're completing for the company. And because they're done with the micro internship, when they're done with whatever that deliverable is, it means these are also very short term. Most of these projects are somewhere between 10 and 40 hours. And I want to be clear, that's not 10 to 40 hours a week or a month. That's 10 to 40 hours in total. So again, going back to those students who have a lot on their plate and busy schedules, this is something they can fit in, especially since the bulk of that work is done independently and remotely. The majority of Parker Dewey micro internships are remote. Now, they do get the chance to connect with the professional and ask questions, but as far as when they're doing the bulk of the work, it's up to the micro intern, as long as they have a Wi-Fi connection and it's a time when they reasonably can do a good job. I used to be in career services and I worked with plenty of students. I was a student at one point that did my best work sometimes at 2 or 3 a.m. Now, there aren't a lot of traditional opportunities that are going to have someone working at that time, but for a micro internship, if that's when a student's brain is a buzzing and when they can do good work, they're welcome to work on it at that time. Now, these can also be posted at any time of year. It depends on employers' needs, and they don't have to align with the academic calendar. But something to note about micro internships is they do move quickly. Most kick off within about a year, not a year, within about a week or so of being posted. So a good rule of thumb for students and recent graduates is to log into the Parker Dewey platform regularly to make sure they're seeing the full breadth of opportunities available to them. If they only log in once a month, for example, there are going to be opportunities that cycled through in between those logins that students never even saw. Another hallmark of Parker Dewey micro-internships is they are always paid. Again, because we know a lot of students can't afford to spend their time on something that's not compensated. So how that works. Companies can create their accounts and post their projects with no cost or obligation. So what that means is if they don't get a candidate they like, they close it out and they don't owe anyone, including Parker Dewey, anything. It's genuinely risk-free. But since students are usually excited to engage in this way, most of the time the employers do end up getting candidates they're excited to select. When they make those selections, that's when the employer gets an invoice from Parker Dewey. The company pays us, and then we take care of acting as the employer of record. So what that means is we're getting the micro intern's payroll information. When the project is done, we're processing the pay to the micro intern. It also means if the micro intern earns above the threshold, they are getting 1099 tax forms from us. The micro interns are independent contractors on Parker Dewey's books. 90% of what the company pays ends up in their pocket, and the 10% difference covers Parker Dewey acting as the employer of record. So, why is it set up this way? One, it makes everything a lot easier for the employers. Depending on what their onboarding process is like, they might have spent more time doing that onboarding and figuring out payroll than they would have explaining and kicking off the project. So it makes it a lot more accessible for those employers who, like students, are also short on time. From the student side of things, this allows them to engage with multiple companies without having to do onboarding at each one of those. It also gives students the opportunity to engage with maybe entrepreneurs or smaller companies that maybe aren't as well known with confidence that, hey, even though I don't really know this company, I know this isn't a scam to steal my identity because my confidential information, that's only with Parker Dewey. They're the only folks that need that because they're the folks that are dispersing my pay. The projects are also always professional, so using skills or knowledge that students are learning in their degree programs, even if it's in their first or second year. Sometimes we'll have companies who are intentionally posting projects that are very straightforward, again, in an attempt to reach those students earlier. So you can see things from all different types of industries, marketing, business, finance, creative. But what you won't see are things like I need someone to paint my fence or walk my dog. One, walk my dog doesn't have a specific deliverable, unless you count a happy dog as a deliverable. That could be debated. But the idea is it's supposed to be focused on those things that'll assess those skills needed for jobs that typically require some sort of a degree, whether it's associate's, bachelor's, or doctorate. So, all of this information together, all these components that make up a micro internship, what it's allowing employers to do is, again, access some of that talent that they may have missed out on otherwise and make their longer term hiring decisions, whether it's for a traditional internship or a full time role, based on real work, an actual understanding of what that candidate is bringing to the table, and also giving that candidate the opportunity to see before making a longer term decision, is this somewhere doing something that I can actually see myself doing longer term? Basically, everyone just gets to make more informed and better decisions. So, a common question, especially in today's economy, is how much does this cost? So, again, we have kind of these three parties at play. So, I want to break down for every one of them. For students, which includes recent graduates, we kind of lump them into a category called career launchers, but there's never any cost. We know cost is a barrier, and that's why every micro internship is paid. So, again, not only is there no cost, but if they get selected for a micro internship, they will be paid for the work that they do. For employers, again, they can create their account and post their projects with no cost or obligation. So it's risk-free. They do end up paying for the cost of the projects. So again, that's going to be whatever the micro intern takes home. We recommend that micro interns earn somewhere between $20 to $25 per estimated hour. Now it's estimated because micro interns don't need to formally track their time, but we ask the employers to give a ballpark when they post the project so we can make sure, one, is whatever they're asking for reasonable for that amount of time? And two, to make sure that the compensation does fall in that ballpark. So they will cover that cost and then the 10% difference to cover the cost of Parker Dewey acting as the employer of record. And if that company goes, oh my gosh, this student was amazing, or this recent graduate is fantastic, we need to hire them on longer term. We're not a staffing firm. We're not a recruiting firm. There are no fees for that. That's the goal, and we love when it happens. We're also going to talk about some different partnership options today, and it's very similar on the employer side. Just like you all as schools have different partnership options, employers do as well. So different costs can come into play there, but the basic posting a project, making selections, they can do as much of that as they want, and it's just the cost of the project and the 10% difference to cover the cost of us being the employer of record. Now, for you all, our partners or prospective partners, looking at who we have in the room today, it looks like most of you are existing partners. A couple people who are here because they don't know much and they're hoping to learn more. But if you're already a partner, hopefully you already know we have three different options we're going to talk about. But our basic one, the one most of our folks sit at, because until 2024, it was our only option. Our basic option is free, no cost. It includes resources to help you share this with your employers, to help you share it with your students, the ability once you've used those resources to request data, just a whole bunch of best practices. And we're going to talk about those options today. Before we get into the options, though, I want to make sure everybody has a really good understanding of exactly how the micro internships work from those other perspectives, the student and recent graduate perspective and the employer one. So, I'm going to start by walking you through the student experience. Now, when they first create their account, they're going to be prompted to set up their profile. Now, this is really similar to like a LinkedIn or a Handshake profile. And the goal of micro internships is that applying is easy. So this profile gets attached to every project they apply for. They don't have to put in this information for every project they want to submit an application for. And they can also update it at any time. And some of these pieces are really impactful in terms of helping their likelihood of selection. So, for you all as our partners, anyone who does coaching or presentations to students, some things you'll want to emphasize is one, adding a brief personal statement about their goals. What are they doing on the platform? Are they looking to explore? Are they looking to get their foot in the door in a particular type of industry? Why are they here? Another big one is adding some highlighted experience. Now, I always like to clarify that micro internships for many students may be their first professional experience. So that is why this doesn't have to be jobs or internships. This could be class projects, extracurricular projects, passion projects, anything where they've demonstrated the skills they're hoping to apply to a micro internship can be beneficial. Another big one, they have the opportunity to upload a resume, even if there's not a lot on it yet. We've seen that companies have a strong preference for candidates who have taken that step. So encouraging them to visit you and get that resume reviewed before they upload it, another best practice. Now, once they've set up their profile, they can hop over to the dashboard, and this is where they're going to see the opportunities. Now, we're going to talk about the importance of employer engagement here in a little bit. One of the reasons it is so important is because companies can feature projects to specific schools. So right now I'm logged in as an institution that as of yet hasn't done too much in the way of employer engagement. So what I see are the open to all micro internships. These are projects that are available to everybody. Now, if I switch my educational institution to a school that's done a little bit more consistently in the way of employer engagement, and pop over to the dashboard, then you're going to see a section called Featured Projects. Now, anything in this section is available to me, but not necessarily to everyone, which means my chances of being selected for those projects are a little bit better. But don't fear, it is not impossible to get selected for the open to all opportunities. As long as students are submitting applications that include completed profiles and thoughtful responses, we see that usually between 5 and 10 applications, those odds of getting selected become significantly higher. So, as the student is looking at the different opportunities, if they decide that they want to learn more based on a title, they can hit the drop down, and this is where they're going to see some key details. One is going to be the project description. What are they looking for the micro intern to do? Another is going to be the anticipated start date, the anticipated end date, and the estimated number of hours. Now, these are determined by the employer. So you can see this is one that is looking for a rather tight turnaround. There are other projects that maybe it'll be a couple of months. Usually projects fall between a couple of weeks to a month. But again, this one's rather tight. And this allows students and recent graduates to decide, do I have time between these two dates? As mentioned, we also ask the employers to give us a ballpark. Roughly how many hours do you think this project is going to take? And our team reviews the description and determines, is it realistic that this project can be done well within 10 hours or whatever the employer has put there? We also use that amount to determine, is the compensation for this project appropriate? Now, again, what the student earns is 90% of the total cost, and what they see here is the 90%. So there's no confusion. This is straightforward what the student or recent graduate would earn if they were selected for and complete this project. Now, most of our projects are remote, and students can see before they even click in whether that's the case. Now, every once in a while, there is a project that, by its nature, has some sort of on-site element. Since this is content creation, I'm going to guess that they probably have to take video of something, and you can't do that unless you're physically near it. But again, most of them are remote, and that clarification is highlighted there too. If they decide they're interested, they can hit apply. And this first question, why do you think we should select you? Always going to be the first question. So, this is a really good one to practice answering with your students. If there are additional questions and what those questions are going to be up to the employer. And I always like to emphasize that these don't need to be essays. In fact, they shouldn't be essays. Being succinct is micro interns' friends. Usually, 2 to 4 sentences can be effective, but in those 2 to 4 sentences, if they can use the STAR method or give an example to support why they should be selected or whatever other question they're answering, that can really make a big difference. So, practicing that STAR method with your students is huge. Underneath that, there are some quick yes or no questions. Now, the employers are the ones who review the combination of the profile and the application responses, and they make the decision about who they select for these projects, but they don't see the answers to these questions. This is just for us at Parker Dewey, and it's helped us understand that students are a lot more likely to try out a micro internship with a company they hadn't heard of before than they are to apply for a traditional internship or a full-time job with a company that wasn't already on their radar. And that makes a lot of sense. Not only are those longer term commitments usually predicated by some knowledge of the organization, but if the company wasn't on their radar, it's not like they're checking out their jobs page on the regular. All that to say that if you have employers who are coming to you wondering, how can I get in front of your students? How can I help them understand what we do and build an awareness of our organization? Micro internships are a great way to do that. Now, once the student submits their application, they'll be able to see it under the Applied tab, and they'll see two sub-tabs underneath that. Under Active, that's where they're going to find their application for as long as they're still being considered for the opportunity. If it moves to Past, that's how they know they weren't selected for that particular project. Now, we do have some employers who will respond to every application, others still who might even give a little bit of feedback, but depending on whether they left the project open to all or how long they left it up, that may not always be realistic. And that's why we introduce the tabs. We don't want your students wondering, well, what's my status? Am I ever going to hear? Could I still be picked for this? They know based on the tabs, even if the employer doesn't respond to their unique application. Now, if it moves to selected, good news for the student. They've been picked for that project, and that's also when they're going to receive the contact information for the professional of the company and our micro internship success checklist. It's going to walk them through step by step what they should do to make a good impression on this project. All the way from here's how you reach out to the professional to set up a kickoff call to here's the information you should take from that call to depending on whether you're having check-in meetings or exchanging emails. Here are templates to help you reflect on what have you done? What questions do you still have? And to help them make sure expectations are aligned for the remainder of the project. And if they run into any hiccups along the way, we are here to support. Both the students and employers get communication from us saying, hey, your project is kicked off. We hope things are going well, and here's who to reach out to if you have challenges. If things change with the student, life happens, maybe a personal circumstance has changed, maybe they've gotten sick, as long as they communicate with us, we can help them navigate the situation and still leave a good impression. So coming back to those students who at the beginning were saying, I can't afford to take unpaid opportunities, or I don't know what I want to do, or I'm looking for ways to explore that's actually going to fit with my schedule. I won't read you all of these quotes, but they're just some nice examples that demonstrate how micro internships really made an impactful difference for these students as they were trying to navigate those challenges and begin their careers. And if you are interested in additional student testimonials, really understanding how this can have an impact on students from a variety of different types of schools in varying parts of the country with various career goals, please feel free to check out our student testimonials. I just popped those in the chat. Now, some common questions I get. Can international students do this? And the answer is typically, but it depends on the school. They do need to have work authorization, so CPT, OPT, or a work visa, but every school has their own process. So that's why our guidance to international students is before they start applying to make sure that they have touch base with whoever supports international students at their campus. So, for example, some schools are pretty flexible about when credits can be registered, or maybe you can do 40 hours of work for one credit. That can work really well for micro internships. Other schools have a minimum of 120 and it has to be registered at a very specific time in the semester for it to go through for credit. Sometimes those don't work as well for Parker Dewey. And we want to make sure we are never overstepping, so that's why we advise them to talk to you. Now, if they are able to get that authorization and they're selected and kicking off, again, we, Parker Dewey, are the employer of record. So that means regardless of what company they may be communicating with, the offer letter will be from Parker Dewey on Parker Dewey letterhead. And sometimes we do have companies who are very intentionally using projects as an audition for a specific longer term role. And that company may unfortunately already know they're not in a position to offer sponsorship. If that's the case, it will usually be dictated at the top of the project description. This is an audition used for hiring for a longer term role. And if it needs to be a US citizen, they'll usually clarify it there. So, international students in particular, I mean, everyone is encouraged to read the project descriptions carefully, but international students in particular are encouraged to do so. Another population that can often struggle with finding opportunities but can find them on Parker Dewey is undocumented students. And that's because, again, micro interns are independent contractors. Now, they do need to have typically an ITIN number, and it needs to be valid and not expired. And we have found that most undocumented students do already have that number. Now, I cannot emphasize enough that I am not a lawyer of any kind, much less an immigration lawyer. But we have heard from some students who have immigration lawyers that if they don't already have an ITIN, now may not be the time to get one. This is not legal advice. Disclaimer again, I am not a lawyer. I'm just sharing what we've heard from some other folks. But again, most undocumented students do already have that ITIN number. So now that we've talked about the student experience, who can participate, I want to talk a bit about the other side of things. How does this work for employers? What does that process look like? So for that, I'm going to switch over to my employer account and I'm going to show you what the process of posting is and how easy it is for employers. Now, when they create their account, it is super simple for them to do. Again, there's no cost or obligation. They're just putting in a little bit of information about their company that gets attached to the project. Once they've created that account, they get access to a project library, and they're not limited to the projects in this library. They could post something custom, but it gives them ideas for some of the categories we tend to see most often. So let's say I need some help with a research project. This is going to give me some ideas. If market research is what I'm looking for, I can click on the template, and it's going to give me a starting point for how to describe that project. Now, again, if there isn't a template for what I need, I can also check out the tips for posting a custom micro internship project, reflecting on, is this using skills or knowledge that students are learning in their degree programs? Have I identified a specific deliverable? All that good stuff. But moving forward with our template example, I can pick my start and end date. The default is remote, but I can clarify if there's an on-site element. Our projects are usually scoped at about 20 hours, so I can see, all right, the micro intern would earn $400 for this project, and the total cost to me is going to be about $445. Now, if an employer is using this as an audition, so to find someone for a longer term role, they're usually going to hire multiple micro interns. And whoever does the best job on the project, that may be the one to get the traditional internship or job offer. Now, obviously, there's a cost involved in doing this. But what we hear from employers is one, traditional recruiting is expensive regardless. And two, by making those longer term hiring decisions for internships and full-time roles based on real project work instead of just guessing based on a resume or an interview, it makes it far more likely that this is actually going to be a good fit. So, from the perspective of the employer, a couple $1,000s to make sure they're not having to turn right back around and start that recruiting process over is money well spent. Now, here's where the company gets to decide who sees the project. If they leave this blank, it is going to be open to all Parker Dewey users. But what most companies will do is decide to feature the project to a specific school. So let's say I wanted to engage students at CSU Bakersfield. By popping that in there, it means only talent from that institution will see the project. They can determine whether they want just current students or recent graduates, or if they're open. They can let us know if this is an audition for a specific longer term opportunity, and here is where they can adjust those application questions. If they're using a template, we've made some suggestions. They could get rid of those. The only question they can't change is that first one. Why do you think we should select you? Because honestly, the answers are usually really helpful in telling in who would be a good pick. Once they hit post now, it goes to the Parker Dewey team and we review it. And we're making sure, again, one, that whatever they're asking for can reasonably be completed in the estimated number of hours. Two, that there is a specific deliverable involved. Three, we're also making sure the compensation is appropriate. So basically, just making sure that everything is on the up and up before it's made visible for students to see and start applying. So a reminder of why companies are using Parker Dewey. The primary reason is usually recruiting, and that's what these first two buckets fall into. If they've got a specific longer term opportunity in mind and they want to make sure they're making the right hire, this is a great way to confirm fit and hire with confidence. If they are trying to make sure they've got a larger pool of talent for when they do have opportunities arise later, that's the second recruiting goal, building that pipeline, building brand awareness. So companies can do this with really straightforward projects. Sometimes they'll have a student ambassador. So they're connecting with a student, making them aware of what their company does, and then that student is spreading the word to other students on their campus. Other times they'll have students do really straightforward research projects that could be done by a student in their first or second year. Again, building that awareness of their industry and the company and having those things in mind when they're making decisions about their majors and longer term career plans. And then that third bucket, not necessarily the primarily intended use, but still a valuable one, is for companies who are just looking to get some on-demand project support. Nonprofits, small orgs, entrepreneurs, sometimes big companies too. Usually they're focused on recruiting, but they all have these little projects that don't necessarily require onboarding, but maybe they've been wondering, if I had the time, I'd love to research XYZ, or I'd love to do some benchmarking, or I'd love to whatever follows in that sentence. That can be a great use of micro-internships. The student's getting a relevant experience, and the company is getting something that they'd love to have done for them by that student or recent graduate. So going back to that first goal, hiring, recruiting, this is an example. If a company comes to us and says, we are trying to hire for an entry-level data marketer, or we'll say, okay, share a little bit about your job description. Let's take a look. So if they're looking for someone who knows how to work with data, who has an awareness of content strategy, who needs to be able to communicate their recommendations based on what they find, we will break down that description and we will come back to them with customized micro-internship recommendations that are going to help them assess for the necessary skills. So in this example, for that entry-level data marketer, the company could have someone do some data cleanup or visualization. That's going to show that they understand data. They know how to work with it. They know how to share something and tell a story with it. They could also have a micro intern do some content performance reporting or to do some campaign analysis. Those are both going to demonstrate necessary skills. And again, based on the results of that project, the employer is going to be able to make a decision about their longer term hires based on real work, not hypotheticals. Another nice piece for employers is that this can really be incorporated into any phase of their recruiting schedule. Now, I don't know about all of you, but when I was in career services, if I had a company at a career fair that wasn't currently hiring, I had students coming to me to complain about it. I know that other folks have had this experience because so many of us now have the rule that if you're coming to the career fair, you have to have an opportunity currently available. Where that can get challenging is if the recruiting cycle for that company doesn't line up perfectly with the career fair. You might be taking a company out of the running that could eventually have great opportunities for your students and would have benefited from making those connections. but you want to make sure students have realistic and right now kind of next steps if they've connected with a company. So micro internships can be great for that purpose. If they know they've got an internship or a job that's going to be posted soon, but maybe isn't quite right and had time to register for your career fair, a micro internship can be that immediate next step so the student knows if I'm talking to you at your table, this is what I can do after I walk away. It's a great way to keep folks engaged. It's a great way to evaluate candidates. And for those employers who, for whatever reason, just aren't going to be able to make it to your career fair regardless. Maybe it's not realistic geographically. Maybe their budget's been tightened. This is still a great way to engage your students. So here's an example from Smith and Nephew, who used it for longer term hiring. They were struggling to find talent that was aware of their company, despite being a really great brand and despite having some kind of national recognition in their space. Students weren't necessarily aware of that. So they said, how can we find talent that is going to be interested enough to come into our rotational leadership program? And how can we make sure they're a good fit? So they posted a micro internship, and what they did was have the micro interns review their different products, pick one, and put together a pitch deck for that product. So that did a couple of things. One, it was really nice for Smith and Nephew to kind of have that perspective from an outside view of what do other people see as selling points of our products. So that was beneficial. But the even bigger benefit was that these students now were in their recruiting pipeline. They learned about Smith and Nephew while they did the project. And the Smith and Nephew was able to see, well, which students did a good job researching this? Who has great presentation skills and communication skills? Who would be a good hire? So after they were able to extend offers, and five of these micro interns were ultimately hired full time. So they didn't end up extending offers to all 12. Again, this helped them assess who's going to be a good fit. I think they ended up extending offers to six, but again, because of the positive micro internship experience, five of them accepted, and all five of them were still in Smith and Nephew a year later. So this was cost effective. It helped them find talent that was the right fit and didn't immediately turn around and leave. And it gave them some valuable information and context about their products all at the same time. Now, for the idea of creating that expanded talent pipeline, reaching talent earlier, Train Technologies is a great example. They use student ambassadors in that way. So they're building that awareness of their company and what they do early in students' careers. They're getting to make those connections at a time when it's not too late, basically. So those students are getting to make those decisions with that company in mind because they've used micro internships to build that awareness. We also see that micro internships have some really nice longer term outcomes in terms of career readiness. And this is actually something that we just recently updated. We did an update to this report near the end of February. But we asked recent micro interns, what, if any, impact do you feel your micro internship had on your career readiness? And we used the NACE career readiness competencies for this. So we are asking them to reflect on, sorry, trying to get rid of that little icon there. We'll leave it for now. So, did this make you feel like you improved in professionalism or technology or these different areas? As you can see, the most common response across all of the competencies is that this micro internship helped me improve a lot. Now, they could say there was no change at all, or I feel like I'm at the same level of proficiency, but I built confidence. And there are those responses, but across the board, the most common is that I am improving as a young professional as a result of this micro internship. And the fact that professionalism tends to be the most impacted competency is also something to keep in mind when speaking to employers. We know this has been really salient for a lot of our partners who are saying employers are asking or wishing by the time they were applying for our internship, we wish they had a little bit more polish or were a little more professional. Well, encourage those employers. If you start engaging our students as first and second year students in straightforward micro internships, essentially they're building their own more professional and polished talent pool to hire from. Now, on the other side of things, we also see that these have some really nice outcomes for employers, even if we're just focusing on the project work. We're seeing that over 95%. words, over 97% of the micro interns that complete their projects and get feedback are either meeting or exceeding expectations. Employers are rating most of them as they acted and executed this project like they were an industry veteran. So, very helpful for companies to be able to see these skills in real time. Now, in terms of longer term impact, this is also really beneficial for companies in terms of reach. We've already kind of covered this, but basically, students who otherwise wouldn't have been able to engage, micro internships are accessible, and because they can, they do. We see that over 80% of those selected for micro internships come from historically underrepresented populations in the workplace. Now, when we look at paid internships, it's very interesting because they're paid, right? They're compensated. That removes a barrier. But we're still seeing that when it comes to paid internships, barely more than a quarter of the students selected are coming from those historically underrepresented populations. And that just speaks to the fact that even if an opportunity is paid, even if it's exciting, if a student doesn't have time, if a student doesn't have transportation, if a student doesn't know the opportunity exists, they're not going to be able to engage. And micro internships help them overcome all of those barriers. We also see that using micro internships to hire is very cost effective for companies. Again, primarily because making those more informed hiring decisions leads to less turnover, and that turnover is really, really expensive. And just to add more proof to that, we see that 98% of recent graduates who have done micro internships stay in their first full-time role for longer than a year, which is especially impressive when you compare it to recent graduates overall, when less than half of them are staying in that first full-time role for longer than a year. Now, with that chart, I always like to be very clear. They're not all going on to full-time jobs with the companies where they micro-interned. Sometimes that micro-internship is an aha moment, but in the other way, where they think, oh, I thought that I wanted to work at this kind of company doing this type of work, but even this short project let me know this isn't actually the fit for me that I thought it was going to be. And if a student or recent graduate can have that aha and take that knowledge and find somewhere that is going to be a better fit, that's still a win. It's a win for the student who doesn't have to get onboarded and figure out their benefits only to realize I'm going to have to figure this all out again. It's a win for the company who doesn't have to turn around and do more expensive recruiting once they realize it's not a fit. So it's good for everybody through micro internships to be able to have whatever realizations these projects lead to. So as promised, some information about our partnership options. How can you take what has been shared in this presentation and share it with others to lead to these successes and these aha moments and these positive outcomes for your students? Our three partnership options, let's talk a little bit about each of them. While I do that, while we have about 15 minutes left here, I'm also going to launch another poll. Do not feel like you need to fill it out right away. But as we talk about some of these options, just want you to consider which ones are relevant for you. So Parker Dewey Basic Partnership. This is no cost. Often I get a follow-up question. Is it really no cost? It is genuinely no cost. But this is going to give you resources to share this with your students and your employers. So there are landing pages that you can use that are going to describe to your students and your recent graduates why this is beneficial for them and for your employers why they should use this to engage your students. Now, for those of you who may have established partnership, sorry, example test pop up there, who may have established partnership before May of this year, you may not have realized that you now have not just the page to share with students and recent graduates, but also the page to share with employers. That's because in 2022, companies got the ability to feature projects to specific schools. This was based on feedback that we got from employers who recognized the value of this as a pipeline builder, but said, yes, it's a remote project, but if my goal is to get them to eventually do an on-site internship, I want to be able to feature to local talent. At the same time, we heard from all of you at the schools, you put a lot of effort into building and maintaining these employer relationships. Heard. And basically, if anything they posted had to be open to everyone, you were going to encourage them to focus more on things that were more specific to your students. So that's why in 2022, companies got the ability, again, to feature to specific schools. But now we're seeing that more companies do that than leave things open to all. So, what this means is it's become more important for the partners at the schools to share this with their existing employers. If those are the folks that are already coming to your career fair or asking to table on campus or do those other things, they are the employers that are more likely to feature projects to your students because they want to create that recruiting pipeline. And once we realize that, that's why now all of our partners have both student and employer facing faces and why we encourage all of our partners to have both student and employer facing points of contact. The marketing collateral gives you lots of resources, again, to spread the word to both audiences. We have partner checklists that really break it down, very easy to use templates. And at the basic level, once partners have completed those checklists, they have the ability to request annual data. So you can see after you've done that, how many students have created accounts? Are they applying? Are they getting selected? For what projects? All that good stuff, as well as any feedback left either by the micro intern or the employer. We added those checklists in as a requirement because we realized once that importance of employer engagement really became more paramount with the ability to feature, if a school wasn't doing the things on the checklist to engage both audiences, we usually just didn't have a lot of data to share. And we want to make sure when we're pulling that data for you that it is as meaningful and comprehensive as it can be. We also have a pretty regularly scheduled webinar where we talk about how those things ended up on the checklists. Now, if you were interested in our last session, you may have noticed it got moved back a little bit, and that's because we're seeing a shift in what is most effective for engaging employers. We said, well, we're starting to see this trend. Let's hold off to see if this trend holds before we do another session. So we're running some numbers and we're going to update folks. But if you want to keep an eye out and be on a list to informed when the next session of that is scheduled, please do not hesitate to register. But we always just want to make sure we make it super clear that when it comes to Parker Dewey Partnership, sharing this with just your employers or just your students is not enough. Sharing it with just your employers wouldn't be enough either. It is a matter of sharing to both. We recommend starting with the employer engagement because, as we all know, it can be really easy to lose students. If they log in and the projects that are open to all at that time don't resonate with their career goals or there's nothing local to them at all, it might be hard to get those students back. So we encourage starting with that employer engagement. Even a few opportunities from companies students recognize can really do a lot to lend legitimacy to the other opportunities that are new for them to try. So there are a variety of different strategies you can do to get that employer engagement going. Alumni are a great resource. I see some of you who have already filled out the polls said, hey, I'm interested in sharing this with alumni to generate more opportunities for my students. Again, engaging your existing employer partners, the folks that table on campus, that come to your career fair, that ask you, how can I reach your students? They are key to engage, focusing on local employers. There's potential to get your grant writing team involved if you're considering a program. I'll highlight that a little bit here in a second. We also have some schools who do a great job of using micro-internships on their own campus. So all that to say, there's a lot of different ways to generate opportunities that are unique to your students. And as a Parker Dewey partner, we are always happy to have those conversations with you and figure out how we can help. Just to really drive home the importance of that employer engagement, we have an example. On the left, we see some data from a school who was consistently sharing Parker Dewey as a resource with their employers. They were doing the steps in that checklist, and we know because we saw the resulting page traffic. Their employer page in a year, was getting views. Companies were creating accounts from that page. Pretty directly correlated. Students were getting selected. They were earning money and they were getting feedback. Now, if you do not have an existing employer network, or if you're trying to build one, but maybe it's going to be a little bit more slow going, I want to make it clear it's not impossible for your students to get selected if you're not doing the employer engagement. But as we see in the numbers, it is less likely. The gray or blue column, depending on how you're looking at it, they didn't really share it with employers. We know because the page didn't get any traffic. No accounts were being created from their page. There was still a student selected and they earned money, so there's a win there. But without that employer engagement, it's just not going to be nearly as successful at scale as we know most of you are probably hoping it would be. If you're motivated by success stories, I know we already shared the student testimonial, but here are just a few examples of how these micro internships were used by companies who did have those longer term recruiting and hiring goals. So please, you'll all get the slides afterwards. Feel free to check these out and look at those quotes in more detail. And we do have the additional partnership options. Now, what I've covered so far, the landing pages, the resources to share, the ability to request data once a year after completing the checklists, those are all included at our basic no cost level of partnership. But if you want access to your data on demand, if you know that you are going to be very proactively sharing this and you want to be able to see in real time, did the email I send to students lead to signups? What kind of applications are my students submitting? Are employers creating accounts from our page? Parker Dewey Plus is probably an option you're going to want to check out. This is going to allow you to see all of that in real time. My favorite part coming from career services is the ability to see your students' profiles and applications. It's a really powerful coaching tool. Again, the applications for Parker Dewey projects are pretty straightforward. So if you realize your students are struggling with those, it's a really good indicator that they might be struggling with other application processes as well. And it gives you the opportunity to be really proactive. Again, if an employer creates an account from your Parker Dewey partner page, even if they haven't posted yet, you have an awareness of that. So that allows you to be proactive too and encourage those partners not only to take the next step to post a project, but also to get involved on your campus in other ways. Come to the career fair, come to the tabling event. Some of y'all are creative. Whatever your trick or treat employer event, encourage them to do other things since they're obviously interested. And then some additional features with Parker Dewey Plus. It is a $2,000 a year subscription, but in that subscription, the cost of hiring a student ambassador is also covered. Now, this is a micro internship scoped at about 18 hours, and what the student does in this project is it takes some of the pressure of sharing this off of your shoulders while giving them a real and meaningful experience. So they are going to do some posting on LinkedIn. They're going to do some research on employers. They're going to talk in classes to their peers. So they're sharing this with both of those audiences too. And just like any other micro internship, they get paid. So of that $2,000 a year subscription, $360 of it is going to go into the pockets of one of your students who you select. Now it's up to you. Sometimes our Parker Dewey Plus users prefer to supervise the student themselves, but we have this option because we know y'all are busy. So if you prefer that a member of the Parker Dewey team supervise, one, because you're busy, and two, because you just might like the idea of them making a professional connection outside of your institution, we are happy to do that as well. And some of you may even be eligible for Parker Dewey Plus at no cost. If your school already has a program, if you qualify for one of our ongoing multi-school programs. A program, by short definition, is just somebody other than the company is covering the cost for the company to engage students in micro internships. So ones we have running right now, the DeLuca program. The DeLuca Foundation is covering costs for companies that have longer-term recruiting goals or nonprofits. The resulting projects are only available to students from select schools. That includes any student in the state of Connecticut or Florida, or from any HBCU or members of the HSI Career Collaborative. We have the Kansas Micro Internship Program, where external parties are covering the costs for Kansas-based companies to engage students from public Kansas institutions. The IEDC Micro Internship Program. It stands for Indiana Economic Development Corporation, which is why we just say IEDC, but they're covering the cost for Indiana organizations to be able to engage students from Indiana schools. And not only for all of these programs are they covering the cost for the companies, but they're also covering the cost for the qualifying schools to get Parker Dewey Plus. Now, not all of these include the Student Ambassador Micro Internship, but the dashboard access with all the data, that is covered. So if you fall into any of these categories, please follow up with me afterwards. I'll go ahead and put my email in the chat, or you could respond to the follow-up with the slides and the recording. But take advantage of that Parker Dewey Plus access while it's available to you. Now, The Kansas program, it has been extended beyond the end of 2025. That is outdated. But as far as I am aware, the DeLuca program, that May 31st access is a hard stop. So again, take advantage of it while it is available to you if you qualify. So finally, that last option, the program option. The reason why the program is so much more expensive than the basic, or well, the basic's free, so it's not hard to be more expensive than that. But why it's so much more expensive than the Parker Dewey Plus is because again, it covers the cost of paying your students. So basically, you get to say to whatever employers you decide qualify, hey, you can engage our students in paid projects at no cost to you. So we've had companies or partners who have done this in a variety of different ways. We have had some who have used this to create opportunities for alumni, so alumni don't have to pay. We have had some focus on local employers, some focus on employers just in specific industries. We are behind the scenes to make sure whatever rules you set are being put into play. We also cover a dashboard so you can see not only Parker Dewey Plus in general, but a dashboard specifically focused on the projects that are funded by your program. And we will go with you step by step to determine whatever rules you want it to be. Now, programs can be customized in just so many ways that we could talk about programs alone for an hour, and we do. Our next webinar on this topic is scheduled for, I think, March 18th. Yep, March 18th. So next week. So if you maybe have a grant application you're thinking about submitting, or maybe there was a donation and you want to figure out how to have that positively impact a large number of students, or maybe you just want to learn more about that whole program option and how it might work for your unique institutional goals, highly encourage you to join us for that webinar next week. Even if you can't make it live, register. You'll get the slides, and we'd love to walk you through what a Parker Dewey program setup looks like. And we also encourage all your audiences to join us at regularly scheduled events. We love seeing you all here. We also have monthly webinars for your students. We have office hours for students. Those are more interactive. We do profile reviews, we answer questions, and we have monthly webinars for your employers. So you are welcome, if you want to hear the student perspective or the employer perspective of things, to join us at those events or to share with the respective audiences. I know I shared a lot of information in this webinar. I hope that it was helpful. Y'all were a quiet group in the chat today, but that's okay. As far as next steps go, take the information that was shared today, digest it, and think about, what are your goals? What are you struggling with at your institution? Are you hearing that students are trying to get projects or opportunities with industries that you're not seeing a lot of natural interest from? What a program to generate those opportunities best meet your needs? Are your students in general, is it a commuter school and they just don't have a lot of time? So they're looking for short-term opportunities, and this could be a way to bring it to them. Reflect on what is happening at your institution and how can the information you heard today maybe help? And then schedule a meeting with us so we can help break it down and make a plan that's going to be most impactful for y'all. Partner with us. If you're not already a Parker Dewey partner, get those resources that's going to make it easier to get the word out, and then use them to actually get the word out. Cannot overemphasize enough the importance of sharing this not only with your students, but also with your existing partner employers, because this benefits both sides. Not only are you going to be creating opportunities for your students, but you're also going to be helping your employers recruit them in a really innovative and effective way. All around, it's a win. So with that, folks, if there are any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat. Again, everyone is going to get the slides and recording afterwards. I'll hang out for a few minutes in case anything comes up, but in the meantime, just want to say thank you all so much for your time. Hopefully, we will be connecting and continuing the conversation one-on-one in the near future.